Hi, everyone. For my read aloud, I'm going to read a book called Grayson by Lynn Cox. And Lynn is actually a high schooler. And when she was in middle school, she didn't really like many sports, but she realized that she liked swimming. And she realized that she liked swimming really long distances. And so she started becoming an athlete that swam out in the ocean. And one day, when she was in the ocean, she came across a surprising whale that started following her. So this is her story of that day. There's something frightening and magical about being on the ocean, moving between the heavens and the earth, knowing that you can encounter anything on your journey. The stars had set, the sea and sky were inky black, so black I could not see my hands pulling water in front of my face, so black that there was no separation between the sea and the sky. They melted together. It was early March and I was 17 years old, swimming 200 yards offshore outside the line of breaking waves off Seal Beach, California. The water was chilly, 55 degrees, and as smooth as black ice. And I was swimming on pace, moving at about 60 strokes per minute, etching a small, silvery groove across the wide black ocean. Usually my morning workouts started at 6 a.m., but on this day I wanted to finish early, get home, complete my homework, and spend the day with friends, so I had begun at 5 a.m. There were vast and silent forces swirling around me, strong water currents created by distant winds and large waves, the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, and the rapid spinning of the earth. These currents were wrapping around me like long braids of soft black licorice, and I was pulling strongly with my arms, trying to slice through them. As I swam, all I heard were the waves, rising and tumbling onto the shore, the smooth rhythm of my hands splashing into the water, the breath that I drew into my mouth and lungs, and the long gurgling of silvery bubbles rolling slowly into the sea. I slid into my pace, and I felt the water below me shudder. It wasn't a rogue wave or a current. It felt like something else. It was moving closer. The water was shaking harder and buckling below me. All at once, I felt very small and alone in the deep, dark sea. Then I heard a sound. I thought it was coming from the ocean's depths. At first, it seemed to be a whisper. Then it grew louder, steadily, like someone trying to shout for help, but unable to get the words out. I kept swimming and trying to figure out what was happening. The sound changed. It became stranger, like the end of a scream. In my mind, I quickly went through a list of the ocean sounds that I knew and compared with them with what I was hearing. There were no matches. The hairs on my arms were standing straight out. Whatever it was moving closer. The ocean was charged with energy. It felt uncertain and expectant, like the air just before an enormous thunderstorm. The water was electric. Maybe that was it. Maybe the water was warning of an approaching squall. Maybe energy from distant winds and torrential rain was being transmitted through the water. I checked the sky above and the distant horizon. Both were dull and as black as ink, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I lifted my head to see the wave height. The shore break wasn't increasing, and there weren't any wind waves, not even dimples on the ocean's surface. There was no sign of a storm. It didn't make sense. The energy in the water was intensifying. I felt like I was sitting on a tree branch beside a nest of angry, buzzing bumblebees. All at once, the sea's surface erupted nearby. There was a rushing and plunking sound, like raindrops hitting the water, but nothing was falling from the sky. This was wrong, very wrong. Out of the darkness, things were flapping into my face, flicking off my arms and my head. It was like swimming through a sea of locusts. And with each impact, my muscles tightened. I was tingling with fear, and all I wanted to do was turn and sprint for shore. But I told myself, stay calm. You need to focus. You need to figure out what this is. Take a deep breath. I looked down deep into the Black Sea. Thousands of baby anchovy were darting through the water like lit sparklers. Blinded by panic, they were frantically tearing away from their schools and leaping out of the ocean like popcorn cooking on high heat. They were trying to evade something larger. Light was exploding around me like hundreds of tiny blue flashbulbs constantly firing. When I turned my head to breathe, something leaped into my mouth, wiggling across my tongue and flapped between my teeth. It was larger than the water bug I had once inhaled on a lake in Maine. larger than an anchovy. Without thinking, I spat it back into the sea. It had bright silver sides and was about 6 inches long. It was a grunion, a fish nearly twice as large as the baby anchovy. The grunion were chasing the anchovy, snatching them from the water and swallowing them whole. More grunion were swimming in, bumping into my thighs, raking their pointy fins across my shoulders. But I smiled. The grunion had returned. Every year, the grunion return to California in the spring and summer. They wait just offshore for the full moons or new moons when the tide is high, so they can swim ashore and lay their eggs. It always seems to be a miracle that they return every year and know exactly where and when to swim ashore. A lone male grunion, a scout, swims ahead, and if the coast is clear, hundreds of female grunion follow him in, each with as many as 8 male grunion swimming alongside. They choose a special wave, one that is on the receding tide so that it will carry them higher onto the beach, and the female's eggs will not be washed out to sea. Once a female reaches the beach, she digs a hole in the sand with her tail and then wiggles back and forth, drilling herself down into the soft, wet sand until she is buried all the way to her lips. There she lays up to 3,000 eggs, and one of the male grunion arches around her and releases his milk to fertilize the eggs. Then the adult grunion swims back to sea while the eggs incubate in the warm sand for 10 days. Then the baby grunion hatch and ride the tide back out to sea to begin their lives in the ocean. I love to watch them come ashore, and I love to go grunion hunting. It was a big event in Southern California. In summer, I would meet with my friends on the beach on moonlit nights and wait for the grunion. We'd spread out large, bright striped beach blankets on a berm at the crest in the beach, beyond the reach of the incoming waves. We'd sit wrapped in more warm, woolly blankets, sometimes alone or sometimes with friends. We'd talk in muffled tones so no one would scare the fish away, about boyfriends and girlfriends, about summer plans and barbecues, about our lives and our families, our dreams and how we felt. We'd explore our lives, and sometimes we too were restless, awaiting our own high tide. Someone in the group would whisper, "There he is!" We'd jump to our feet, scanning the beach for a single fish. When we spotted one on the sand, we'd watch and wait for what seemed like forever. Then a few minutes later, a wave would lift hundreds of grunion up. This wave would be so heavily laden with fish, it would rise more slowly than any other. As it curled, its dark glassy face would be altered by hundreds of grunion heads and tails protruding at all angles. The wave would crash on shore, and the grunion would spin and tumble across the sand, flipping, flopping, and pulling themselves beyond the water's edge. Their gills would beat in and out as they gasped for air. It seemed amazing to me that they could hold their breath for 2 or 3 minutes, and that they had to leave the sea and return to shore to continue the cycle of life. As soon as the grunion finished laying their eggs, they'd flip and flop back towards the water. At that moment, we'd charge across the sand, kicking the mud on the backs and trying to scoop them up with our bare hands. They were always slippery, squirmy, and quick, and harder to hold than a warm cube of butter. My friends and I might catch a few, but none of us had the heart to take them home and cook them with a dusting of cornmeal and eat them like some people did. Somehow, we would have spoiled the magic of all that we had witnessed. We were happy to catch them in our hands, feel the pulse of life racing through their bodies, and release them back into the warm, salty waters. As I swam, I felt a strong connection with the agile schools of grunion that I thought I was lucky to be swimming with them, until I realized they were attracting a small school of albacore tuna. Usually, the tuna lived and migrated 20 miles or more off the coast, but the abundance of food had lured them in. Albacore tuna are large fish. They weigh between 20 and 40 pounds. They are shaped like giant oval beech leaves and have dark blue backs and gray blue sides and bellies. They are fast swimmers. At first, I enjoyed the feeling, the way the water wavered and yawed as the tuna zipped into the right and left of me. But when they started leaping out of the water to catch the grunion, I grew concerned. I didn't want to be hit by a 40-pound tuna. I pulled to the right and then off to the left, but they were everywhere. Then it happened. A big tuna, maybe 35 pounds, rocketed out of the water. He smacked onto my back and I jumped very high. Then another bounced off my shoulders. I started giggling. I had to roll on my side and catch my breath. It was raining tuna. What a weird, wild, and wonderful thing. It occurred to me that these tuna would probably attract a larger fish, and the only larger fish I could think of were sharks. So I decided to move closer to shore, away from the feeding throngs. As I got nearer to land, I started watching what was happening in the homes of the north side of the pier. People were starting to get up. Second floor windows that had been dark, gray, and vacant were becoming large glowing squares of gold, and the people moved into their bathrooms, and downstairs, more windows became gold squares. I imagined how warm it must be to be inside those homes. I let my mind enfold me in that golden warmth. It was cold. The Pacific water temperature in March is in the mid-50s. The surrounding water was constantly pulling heat from my body. It was like being wrapped up in a warm blanket on a snowy day and then having someone pull the blanket off. To overcome the heat loss, I had to swim at a rate fast enough to create heat. But still, my skin always felt cold. It was as cold as the water. I could feel the cold working its way deep into my muscles. An offshore breeze carried the warm, sweet smells of smoky bacon and fried eggs, buttery pancakes, and the rich, acidic aroma of brewing coffee across the water. I had been swimming for more than an hour, and my stomach was grumbling loudly. All I had to do was reach the north jetty, turn around, and swim the last half mile back to the pier, and I'd be finished with my workout. I started to relax, stretching my arms, feeling my hands, and feeling the rotation of my shoulders and my core, and the light kick off my feet. My body was slipping through the water like silk sliding across ultra smooth skin. My breaths were long and easy, and I felt good. Everything was in sync. The currents flowing around me, the song of the ocean, the breeze. Except everything below was strangely still. All the fish had disappeared. Lifting my head, I looked to my right and then to my left. I couldn't see anything. I put my face back down and stared into the water through clear goggles. It was like looking into a well at midnight. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there. The water began shaking harder than before, and I was being churned up and down as if I was swimming through a giant washing machine. The water shifted, and I was riding on top of a massive bubble. It was moving directly up from below, putting out a high-energy vibration. It felt like there was a spaceship moving right below me. I had never felt anything this big in the water before. That's the end of chapter 1. And in the upcoming chapters, this baby whale named Grayson comes and swims up next to her. And the story is about how Lynn helps Grayson find help the whale find his mother. It's a nice, true adventure and a sort of mystery. And I love her writing style. I hope you enjoy it too.